Welcome to Integrity Linguistics Institute. So basically, this particular question paper, it has been taken from one of the textbooks of Cambridge University. Right. So we will be discussing in detail regarding two types of questions in OET Reading Part B. So this will be the first question we'll be discussing. And again, it will be, a very interactive session. So you have to respond with your answers in the chat box. And towards the end of the session, if you have any doubts, you can always feel free to reach out to me. And always remember, you have 24/7 access to the OET exam mastery app. All right. So make sure that you use the app to the best of your advantage. Just have to open the app and log into.
ऊपर जो बेटा क्लास માટે.
All right. So today, let's begin with the questions. All right. So this is the very first question, second question. Right. So let's talk about the class agenda today. Right. So let me just take the agenda. That is what we will be discussing. So what you can expect to cover in today's session. Right. So shall we begin? So OET Reading Part B. Right. So first of all, let's understand what is OET Reading Part B. Now see, in Reading Part B, you will come across certain documents, right? Certain documents. And these documents are workplace related documents. Now see, work of health professionals. So when you are working as a registered nurse, okay, registered doctor, registered pharmacist in a hospital, you will be getting some documents from the hospital, right? You'll be getting, emails, you'll be getting policies, you'll be getting guidelines, you'll be getting medical instructions, right? Memos, reminders. So those type of documents are what we call as workplace related documents. So all these content that you see in reading part B are workplace related documents. And based on that, you'll be getting a multiple choice question, right? So we'll be diving into too much detail because we need to understand that OET is not about our language proficiency test, right? Maybe students usually believe OET is only about language, but no, OET has so much layers and we really need to understand what those layers are. So in today's class, we'll be discussing workplace related questions coming from OET Reading Part B. And we'll be discussing two types of questions, right? The first type of question is what we call as a policy type question, right? Policies and procedure type questions. And the second question type is what we call as a purpose-based questions, right? And you may want to have your notebook with you because I'm going to give you a very interesting method, which I call as the SMART method, right? See, you're in the examination hall. Now, in the examination hall, it is a very unfamiliar space, right? You are there, you're a little bit feeling nervous, you're a little bit anxious, you're a little bit tired, listening part A, B, C, reading A, everything is done. So feeling a little bit tired, a little bit exhausted, right? And you're in a high pressure situation. You're not in a comfortable situation, right? So if you make a mistake, there are going to be consequences. So it is not going to be very easy to perform with accuracy, right? And also you have very limited time. See, at home, when you're practicing reading, you can take even 2 hours to finish one reading material. But on the examination day, within that stipulated time itself, we need to find the answers. So quickness and accuracy is important, right? And when you're in a high pressure situation, you need to have the right tools and strategies with you. So in today's class, that strategy, that method is what we call as the SMART strategy, right? So it's a very interesting thing that I have developed. Definitely it will help you out. And today we'll be discussing two types of questions, right? So the first type of question is what we call as policy or procedure type questions. So remember what I told you. What is OET Reading Part B? Reading Part B are workplace related documents. See, all of you are registered nurses, I believe. So when you go to your dream country, that is UK, Australia, New Zealand, US, so when you're going there and working there, you'll be getting policies from them. You'll be getting, procedure guidelines. So when you're working there as a registered nurse, you need to be able to understand these type of documents. So the OET is checking, the OET is assessing whether you are a strong candidate who can understand these type of questions, right? The first type of question is policy or procedure type questions. Now, what are these questions asking? What do policy or procedure type questions ask you? they ask you what is allowed. Okay, so you are an employee, right? So you are not the owner of the hospital. You are working under the hospital. So you have to follow certain rules. You have to follow certain regulations. You have to follow certain instructions, right? So what is allowed? Okay, what is required and what is expected, right? In a workplace situation, right? So that is what. So the question is asking you, what is the medical professional supposed to do according to the guideline? So when you're trying to find the answer, this is what you have to catch, right? So these questions are basically testing your understanding of rules, instructions, and standard practices. So every hospital, they will have their own rules, instructions, and practices, right? And these type of questions are asking you to identify that. So here, what should you think? So how should your brain work? So your brain should work in a very particular manner. So when you're dealing with policy type questions, you must ask yourself, okay, according to this hospital policy, what should the staff do? That is, what action is expected from them, right? What is the correct action required from the medical staff? So if you think like that, if your brain is thinking like that, then finding the answer becomes easier, right? So let's see what are some examples of questions, example questions of part C. So here I have not shown the answer options, right? So usually we have one question and below that we have answer options, but here I'm not showing the answer options because these are example questions. So see, in your question paper, so imagine that you are doing a reading part B question, and this is the question: when is a nurse permitted to administer medication without supervision? Right. So the question is asking you, when there is no supervision, when there is no one observing the nurse, okay, okay, at what, in which situation is the nurse allowed to administer medication? Right? So according to the hospital policy, when there is no supervision, okay, the nurse cannot simply go and administer. Only in certain situations, only in special scenarios, okay, only in very, very special certain situations, nurses are allowed to administer medication when there is no supervision. This is done according to the hospital policy, right? So like this is what the nurse must do. Right. Now let's come to the second question. According to the protocol, how should staff dispose of expired vaccines? So when a vaccine becomes expired, simply they cannot discard it, right? There is a method, okay? There is a standard method in which they have to dispose it. Now see, it is a very strict rule. Okay, these are all strict rules that needs to be obeyed by the staff, right? So this is how your brain should work. What should the staff do? Right. Now let's come to purpose-based questions. So these are different. Okay. Policy type questions are different. Purpose-based questions are a little bit different. So here the question is asking you, why is something done in a certain way? Right? What is the goal or intention, which means the reason? So purpose type questions are asking you the reason. That is what you need to identify. Okay. That is, why is this done like this? So there is a purpose, right? There is a purpose for that. There is a reason for that. So these questions are asking you why, what is the reason, what is the purpose of this action? So an action is done, but they're not asking you what is the action, what is the consequences of the action. They are asking you why is it done. So here the main word when you're dealing with purpose type questions is why. So you have to ask yourself, why is this done? Okay, what is the purpose? Okay, what is the intention? Okay, what is the intention? That is what you need to identify. Okay, so these type of questions are basically testing your ability to understand the reason or aim behind a work action. See, an action is done, right? And workplace action is done. Okay, it can be any type of action, but they are asking you what is the reason or aim behind the action. So if you want to find the answer, how should you think? Your brain should think, why is this action done? Why? That is the most important word you need to identify. Right. So let's see what are some example questions coming under purpose type questions. So see, a question is asking you, what is the main reason for placing hand sanitizer at the entrance. See, what is the action over here? Okay, what is the action? The action is placing the hand sanitizer at the entrance. This is the action, right? This is the action. But what is your duty here? Your duty is to understand why. Okay, why? That is what you need to understand. Why are the hospital telling everyone to keep the hand sanitizer at the entrance? So you have to ask yourself, why is this done? Right? So similarly, let's come to the second question over here. The second question is, why are patients asked to fast before a blood test? So what is the action over here? Patients are fasting before a blood test. This is the action over here. Okay. And what is the question asking you? The question is asking you for how much time they have to fast. Okay. What kind of blood test they are doing? No. They are asking you why patients are supposed to fast before a blood test. Right. So like this, you have to understand the difference between purpose-based questions as well as policy-based questions. So if you have this clarity, then finding the answer becomes more easy. Right. So I'll be sharing this document to you later on. Now, I'm going to give you a very interesting approach when you are dealing with, multiple choice questions. Right. So this is what we call as the SMART method, right? SMART. Right. So this method, if you're using, it will help you to stay focused. That is, your concentration will be where it needs to be and also efficient under exam pressure. Now, you see, always remember that the exam is not a comfortable situation, right? You will become distracted, you will become nervous, you will become anxious, you will lose your confidence levels, you will start to doubt yourself, very little time you will have. So, clarity will go down, confidence levels will go down, judgment quality will go down because you're in a high pressure situation, right? So you need to have certain tools. So as a trainer, that is what I am trying to do, right? Cultivating these skills in you. So SMART. So what does S stand for? So when you are dealing with the question, S basically means spot the stem of the question, right? Question stem. So this is the S stand for spotting the question stem. So those who are new to the session over here, what is this question stem? Question stem is basically the focal point of the question, right? So every question will have one particular focal point. That is, you have to know what your duty is. So the OET is asking you one particular thing. So what is your duty? So say, for example, when you're dealing with a purpose-based questions, what is your duty there? Your duty is to understand what is the purpose, right? If you're dealing with a policy type question, what is the duty there? When you're dealing with a policy type question, your duty is to identify what is expected. Say, for example, those are a little bit new. Let me just show you. 1 second. Yeah. Right. See, for example, second question, right? According to the policy. So this question I'm reading. Yeah. So this is the question that I'm reading. According to the protocol, how should staff dispose of expired vaccines? So what is the question stem over here? How should the staff dispose, right? This is what we call as the question stem, right? Understand? Okay, so question stem is, this is the focal point of the question. So what's the focal point of the question? How should the staff dispose, right? And what is your duty here? Your duty is to identify what is the method in which they have to dispose the thing. So this is what we call as the stem of the question, right? Now let's come to purpose-based questions, right? So here, what is the question over here? Let's read maybe the third question. What is the purpose of using color-coded bins at the clinic? Okay, so in a clinic, there will be dustbins, right? Dustbins, and some dustbins will be red in color, some dustbins will be in blue in color, some dustbins will be green in color. So color-coded dustbins, right? So that is the action. And here the question is asking you, what is the purpose of using color-coded bins? So what is the question stem over here? The question stem over here is purpose of using color-coded bins. This is the question stem. Okay, this is the question stem. And this is the focal point of the question. And this is your duty. Understand? This is the first thing that you have to identify. Right. So this is the SMART method. So under S comes spotting the question stem. So when you read the question, you have to read the question carefully, right? Always give importance to quality reading. Always give importance to quality reading more than quantity. Some students, they sacrifice quality and they only give importance to quantity. They believe, okay, let me read the question 4 times. But even if you're reading the question 4 times, if there is no quality in your reading, if you're not trying to identify the question stem, there is no, there is no effect. But if you're reading the question just one time you're reading, but that is quality reading, then that is much, much better. Right. So like this, S stands for spotting the question stem, and you have to read the question carefully. You have to identify what it is asking, okay, whether it is a rule or whether it is a reason, right? So depending upon the question, okay, so here, okay, the question is asking me a rule, the question is asking me the purpose. So that clarity will definitely help you out, right? Now let's come to M, right? So what is M over here? Mind the question type. So we have different types of questions, right? So we have, say, for example, when we are dealing with multiple choice questions, we have inference type questions, we have, detail specific questions, right? And then we have, opinion type questions, we have referent tracking questions, right? And then we have purpose based questions, right? And then we have, yeah, as I told you, like, main concern type. Again, there are different main aim type questions and all. Okay. So, and again, rules and regulations. So there are different types of questions in reading part B and reading part C and all. So here you have to first of all identify what type of question you're dealing with. Okay. So for example, you have to recognize whether it is asking about a policy. Policy means what action is expected. Okay. What action medical staff have to obey 100 percentage, or if it is a purpose type question. Purpose type question means why it is done. So you need to categorize patients like that. I mean, questions like that. Okay, this question number 1, it is a policy type question. Question number 2 is a purpose based question. Question number 3 is a detail based question. So depending upon the question type, you can bring in the right strategies. So why is this important? This will help you to know what kind of information to look for. So it's going to be a very lengthy paragraph, right? So in that paragraph, there will be a lot of useful information, and at the same time, there is going to be useless information as well, right? So there is no need for you to give importance to useless information. Only the useful information is important to us. But how can you identify which information is useful? Only if you know the question type, right? Next is coming A, right? So A over here stands for analyzing the text. So once you have comprehended the question, right? Once you have retained the question to your memory, then only you have to go and detect the answer in the paragraph, right? So what are the 3 steps over here when you're dealing with? So there are 3 steps, right? Step number 1, step number 2, and step number 3. So step number 1 is what we call as comprehension. Step number 2 is retention. And then comes step number 3, which is termed as detection, right? So first and foremost, you have to comprehend the question. You have to give importance to the question. You have to identify the question stem. You have to identify what type of question it is. So you know, okay, this is the useful information for me, right? So like that, you have to comprehend the question. Then what you need to do, you need to register this information to your memory. Now you must not forget what you learned. You must register this information to your memory, right? And then you need to go to the paragraph. Now you have to analyze the text and try to detect what the answer is. So remember, these are the 3 steps: comprehension, retention, and detection, right? So let's see what is coming over here. Step A is analyzing the text. So now read the paragraph. Again, quality reading, right? It is not about quantity here. It is about quality. So take your time, put a little bit more effort, because they'll be using synonyms. They'll be using synonyms. So you need to understand they are using synonyms. But if your student is not reading properly, they will not be able to identify synonyms. So look for keywords, look for instructions, intentions and all, and do not get distracted by useless information. There will be a lot of useless information, so don't get struck over there. Right. Next comes synonyms recognition, right? Always understand that the OET is very cunning. Okay, so when you're reading the text, don't expect the OET to repeat the same words in the question and the audio. They'll be using synonyms. So you must be able to recognize synonyms. So match words in question with similar words in the text. See, for example, in the question paper, the word will be dispose, right? But in the paragraph, they will use words such as throw away or discard. Now you see, similar meaning, but different words. So you have to be able to identify synonyms. That is what we call as recognize synonyms. And then comes T. That means trimming away the wrong answers, right? So trimming basically means what? Cutting away, right? So now what's your duty? You have to choose the correct answer option, right? So there is only one correct answer option, which means there are two wrong answers, right? In part B, and in part C, you have three wrong answers, only one correct answer. So what should you do? You must bring in your elimination skill, right? You must eliminate the incorrect answer options one by one. So remove the answer options that are not mentioned or which go against the text, right? And then choose the one that clearly matches the rule or purpose. So this is what we call as the smart approach. Okay, so for both these questions, we'll be discussing this particular strategy here. All right, so spotting the question type, minding the, spotting the stem of the question. Then M is minding the question type. A is analyzing the text. R is recognizing synonyms. And finally comes T, which is trimming the correct answer. So this is the SMART method. So it will take some time, but make sure that you slow and steadily, you refine the strategy, right? So why have I, discussed all these things in, too much detail? Because you are not practicing the OET in a very comfortable environment, right? It is going to be a very high pressure situation. So your brain should be, ready to find the answers. So all these things over here that I told you are time saver tips because you have very limited time. And in that time, you need to find the answer. So read the question before the paragraph. This will give you clarity on what you have to look for, right? Then comes focusing skills. So there is no need for you to read every single word. Scan for the keywords. So what is scanning and what is skimming? That I have already discussed in previous classes. In the next class, maybe I will teach you how to scan and skim and all. Right. Synonyms. That is extremely important because the OET is very, very cunning. And since everything is multiple choice questions, you need to be able to eliminate the incorrect answer options. And also your mindset. Okay. You can be a very, very strong student, but in the examination hall, if you are not able to stay calm, if you are not able to use your logic, then it is going to be tough because these questions over here, they are not memory based. Always remember this. In listening, in reading, the questions are not memory based. You have to use your logical deduction skills with a very calm, clear mind to find the answer. So that mindset is extremely important.